Hello, and my name is Peter Rushmer, and I'm your host today of a Half Dozen Things podcast. A Half Dozen Things is a podcast for business owners and professionals just like you. Whether you're an underdog hungry for success or you're already smashing it but want to continue to level up, we're here each week for you to get insight and learning from the very best in the business. No fluff, no BS, and no self-proclaimed gurus talking about how easy business or life is. Just real, frank, and raw conversations. I'm joined today by James Adcroft. James has been in the transport industry for a number of years and has a quite high profile role as compliance manager for a large supermarket chain. However, he's with me today in a personal capacity to discuss the industry as an expert and as someone who's really passionate about it. So I'm super delighted to have him on the show. Please do enjoy. So the red light's rolling and I've got James Adcroft joining me for today's podcast episode, and I'm really grateful. James and I have probably got to know each other over the past sort of 6 to 12 months on social media, on both LinkedIn and Facebook. We're part of similar transport management communities where particularly on Facebook we sort of share experiences, share information around the different roles that we do, and we're both passionate transport professionals, so it felt really natural to invite James on today, and I'm really pleased that he's joined us. He has got quite a high profile role for a household name, but he's here obviously representing himself, and we're sharing some of the ideas that we share on social media for the benefit of the greater industry and for the benefit of those who are interested in listening. So James, over to you really. Are you able to just introduce yourself for the listeners, please?
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, that's really nice of you. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. It's a really nice invitation. I'm grateful for the opportunity. So yeah, as you say, it's probably just worth pointing out at the top, like you say, my job role, and I'm happy to share that, is that I'm the transport compliance manager for Tesco. So as you say, you know, we operate quite a big fleet, quite a well-known name. But that's not why we're together today. Exactly like you've said, you know, you've invited me along here not to represent my employer, you know, but just as a fellow member of the transport community. And that's important in what we're talking about today, because today I want to talk about my thoughts and my experiences of the industry, not necessarily those of my employer. So yeah, great to be here, and thank you, Pete.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. Yeah, I really enjoy the items that James shares, because I think you are a very experienced professional, and also look at things very differently to particularly sort of from my background as well, and obviously have had various exposure to different experiences too. So a few of the things we're just going to speak about on this session, we're going to have a look at tips around maintaining a compliant fleet, particularly when that might be working to a scale. I really wanted to talk to you as well about CPD as well. That's probably a bit of a curveball, but certainly around professional development, because I know you're a big advocate for that. That's something that we've spoken about online particularly. Maybe frustrations around the sector, as well as, you know, we've got a really big, and I certainly feel there's a really big challenge coming, and I'm feeling it on the ground with the types of clients that we work with, which are the sort of smaller to medium-sized fleets, and that's the driver shortage. We're having a real challenge with that, and I'll just be interested to sort of see your insights in that. And then the other key area, which hopefully listeners will be really engaged with and listening, and I think it's something that's coming over the next few years. It's going to be a really big part of the transport sector over the next little while, and that's earned recognition, and that's something that you've been through quite recently,
Sure.
and can share some insights on too. So we'll kick it off at the top, if that's okay, with what are your sort of tips around maintaining a compliant fleet and that sort of thing for those sort of newer transport managers. They're newer into it, and what sort of top tips have you got?
Okay, top tips, I'll try. First of all, you'll be glad to know that, like-minded as we are, CPD made it onto my top tips list. So we've already started off talking the same language, which is awesome. So I'll come to that, because that's really good. Anyway, what did I start off with? Tips. It's really hard, you know, there's so many things and so many sectors, you know, that's part of the challenge, isn't it? What might work in I don't know, let's say supermarkets, which is what I'm involved with, might not work for some other industry sectors. There's so many, you know, that's one of the things that we notice online is that it doesn't matter how much expertise you have in the transport industry, there's still loads of stuff you don't know out there, and people from different sectors are always teaching you stuff. So it's really varied. So I'll try and offer some tips which might be you may be able to apply anywhere. So my first one, and it's a favorite of mine in everything that I do, so I think it's a good one to share, is about developing robust routines. So that's probably one of my biggest tips. Operators that have the most robust compliance routines in place, I find, it's easier for them to achieve the highest standards. The trick for me is making compliance part of the day job, rather than it be an exception or a task that we're going to get round to. And often, if that is the case, a task that gets deprioritized. So, you know, in our busy transport offices or for our busy transport managers, you have a lot of things to juggle, and inevitably service to your customers and costs are going to come high on the agenda, and I don't challenge that. You know, all of those things are important. At no point should we perhaps say, well, compliance should take a lead. My view is that what we should be doing as transport operators is building robust compliance routines so that it just fits in. It's just part of the day job, so that we don't have to, you know, take exception to doing it. That manifests itself in loads of ways. It might be driver routines, you know, day job stuff, such as that routine of a driver going and completing his manual entries, doing his walk round checks. That's an example of something that should just be really robust. It might be management routines, such as downloading tachograph cards and tachographs, completing infringement conversations, ensuring vehicles are inspected within their frequency. It might be training routines, which are super important. So induction routines, periodic refreshers, training on new equipment as it arrives, that sort of thing. So all of those things, I would say my top tip is have them documented, have them embedded, super embedded with the teams that you work with, so that they know that as part of their daily routine, compliance is part of that, and that's among your clerical support, your management teams, your drivers. All of them just see maintaining compliance as just the day job, and you build routines of that. Yeah, and I think and then perhaps the way those routines manifest themselves formally, to kind of do the formal piece around what I've just said, are your policies. So I would take that one step further and say that your reference point for all of those routines are some nice firm policies that declare what you will do and how you're going to do it. And that's a great way of giving those that work with you a reference document. So what are my routines? What are my infringement routines? What are my maintenance routines? Well, I've got a policy here which tells me what I've committed to doing and how I'm going to do it. So there you go. I think routines for everybody would be my first tip.
Perfect. Yeah, I've just written that down as well, along with policies. I think you make a really good point. You know, recently we were dealing with a situation where a driver was using social media and around a company vehicle, and we kind of draw that back from a compliance point of view to have a look at, well, what's the company policy that they've put in place around social media usage. And having readdressed that, it was a good opportunity to go, actually, we kind of need to bring this a little bit further forward and update it and review it. So I thought that was really worthwhile, really good, strong points there, particularly around making sure that it becomes part of the day job and it's just not seen as something that's separate. It's just a part of what we do in the day to day. Yeah, really love that.
And of course, when we talk about the regulator, they love that, don't they? If ever any of us are meeting with the DVSA or the traffic commissioner, then there's nothing they love more than to see that we've got good routines embedded and good policies, because we all know that things go wrong. It happens. No one's going to take us to task necessarily if things go wrong. If we can demonstrate actually that was a one-off, we've got some good explanations for it, we've taken some good next steps to prevent reoccurrence, but underpinning it all is a solid routine and solid policies, which means it's not a frequent occurrence.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, really like that. Fantastic tip. What else you got for us then, James?
Good. I'm glad I started off well.
Very good.
So my next one, I've gone a bit softer here, Pete, actually. My next one is, I've said, invest in people.
Ooh.
So again, I know that this one will have you nodding your head quite quickly, but I'm a firm believer that almost all of drivers, managers, planners, traffic clerks, whatever they may be that work with us, come to work to do a good job. And looking after the people that work with you and is essential part of building a strong compliance culture. So my view is, my tips would be, take time to train people thoroughly on the routines I spoke about, and help them really understand why we have these compliance routines. So it's not just about what we do because it's written here, but people, everybody, drivers, managers, everybody who has a real understanding of why we do what we do, then are going to be more bought into it. And again, that breeds a really good compliance culture, and people will want to do it. So, and that drives your standards. So I would say really investing in that training. And again, on the people side, that personal side, if people feel like you've invested time and effort into supporting them in their job role, then they're going to be naturally more motivated to support the business in their compliance efforts. They feel a bit inspired, they're going to start using their initiative, they're going to be there to support you. Now, I know that I don't want to suggest I'm painting this idyllic picture where everybody's lovely and everybody helps each other. I know that in the real world it can be a bit more challenging, that, and we're all going to be able to talk about a particular person who comes to work and perhaps isn't as motivated as the next man. But I think that as transport leaders, that we have to start from that premise: invest in people, really look after people, really show them why we do things. And that, again, that just naturally nurtures the right compliance culture, doesn't it? So that you've got people around you who are bought into your compliance efforts. So there's my next tip. It would be about the people. They make it for you.
Yeah, what a fantastic tip as well. I think investing in people is an absolutely vital part of developing the sector into the future, for sure. I think my question for you around that one is, and it is, it's such a vital part, and one of the challenges is how we practically make that happen. With I think there's the dog. I did say the dog might go. You shush dog. Oi, you shush. Anyway, right. So back with you. I may shut up in a minute and mute and then let you talk. So I better get my question out very quickly before she goes again. My challenge was around, in transport, you've got lots of moving parts, and it presents a real challenge, particularly against other sectors where you've got people here and you've got people there, and actually getting everyone together to carry training out and raise awareness is probably one of the hardest roles of a transport manager, and compliance team, to be able to do that. Have you got, like, how have you come across that, and have you got any sort of tips on how to try and do that, or do you communicate people? Do you have systems in place where you can communicate with people whilst they're away from the office, for example, to be able to keep people abreast of their development as well?
No, that's a really good point, Pete, because it's about that, what we call a remote workforce, isn't it? So I often, when I'm working with my warehouse colleagues, make that comparison, that they've got their people there, they can interact with them all the time. And you're absolutely right, with a remote workforce, a mobile workforce that aren't there, that's a real challenge for management. And you're right. I think that there are a few tools at your fingertips, aren't there? So in our digital age, you can communicate with your drivers electronically, whether that be giving I don't know, there may be some communications where it's appropriate to use email or text messages or whatever it may be appropriate. But I think, again, it's about, in terms of appropriateness, it's deciding, isn't it, what which communication channel is the best one. So when it's appropriate to have a conversation face to face, then you've got to make it your way to wait for that driver to be available and catch him, when he's in the office. I guess it's about choosing. I guess, yeah, my feedback would be it's about choosing your method of communication carefully. I'll give you an example, and again, it doesn't apply everywhere, but I think it's a nice principle to have. If you've got a driver who is incurring infringements, I wouldn't say that is something that you can resolve remotely. I think the driver deserves to have a bit of time with a driver trainer or a transport manager, whoever the best competent person is. That driver deserves a bit of time to be understood. Let's see what's motivating him. Is there some issue that's making you make these errors? Is it a knowledge thing that we can give him some knowledge? But I think, if it's 2 minutes over the 6-hour rule, maybe not. If a driver is repeatedly offending or there's some issue that is a bit more serious, then I think that's a good example of where we should be reaching out to the driver individually. You don't like that phrase.
I was waiting for when I said resonate.
I told you I used it a lot, didn't I? I think it's about engaging that driver in person. So let's have a chat with him. Let's understand him properly. And again, that goes back to the bit about the people, doesn't it? So my answer to that question, Pete, is about choosing communications appropriately. Some toolbox talks you might be able to email out. If you're giving regular briefings, regular updates, why not have a monthly newsletter of some description or a monthly message that goes out? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that sometimes it's much more appropriate to have that individual interaction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Essentially, first thing, I'll get it out of the way, and that was the in-joke between James and I. There was a previous video I've done, and I knocked the term reaching out, which James has used, and then he said resonate. I'd say that a little bit less. And I haven't quite had a chance to quiz him on why he said that, but that's certainly one of my terms of the month at the moment. I keep saying resonate, so I'm going to try and stop doing that.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor a Half Dozen Things podcast. At Flagship Partners, we take road safety really seriously, and we're your road safety partnership. We help transport companies with compliance and training across their businesses, including first aid, driver CPC, and other transport management services. So if you're FORS accredited or you want to improve your operator compliance risk score, give Flagship Partners a call today.
But actually, what you say is totally true. A few of the things that I've toyed with, and this may help people listening and what have you. There's certain free video hosting platforms like Vimeo. So if you're confident in getting in front of a camera and recording a message, you can actually send a private video. So rather than it being on YouTube and hosted where it's completely public, you can have private videos where you maybe do a briefing, you maybe do a short toolbox talk and send it out. And my findings on that is that's really worked quite well for certain drivers. You ask them to leave a comment, or you ask them questions about it to feed you back questions to demonstrate they've listened. And I find that's quite a fantastic tool that drivers can use at their leisure, and they can feed that back. It hasn't worked for some though, and I think we've got to keep that in mind, that as with all communication, it's very important that we communicate with a driver or any member of staff on a level that works for them as well, and that they can interpret properly as well. So and maybe make that transcripted, for example, so someone might prefer to read it, for example. So sorry, yeah, carry on.
No, I was going to say the other thing that is again, it's really day job and it's quite small but powerful, is don't underestimate that time that the driver is in the office. So although it may only be 5 or 10 minutes, let's not waste that opportunity. I know we're all busy and I'm not being over idealistic here, but if you've got 2 or 3 drivers who are in the office for 10 minutes, well, let's grab a coffee, go around, have a chat with them, see how they're doing. That may be an opportunity to partake, some knowledge, see what's on their minds. So I think sometimes we do see, I do experience drivers who disappear in and out of the office, and I think, is that a missed opportunity to have a quick chat and catch up? Sometimes a training session can be as easy as a quick chat over coffee, and it goes back to that people piece, Pete, my fundamental piece about looking after people and engaging with them.
Yeah, absolutely. The other opportunity that I'll mention whilst we're on the subject, and I'm really passionate about, is the gate check. I think you can use a gate check with a driver as a stick or a carrot, and I think when you engage with drivers and they understand why you have to do a gate check, because that's part of the role that we have to carry out, and demonstrate that we're effectively managing the check process and making sure that drivers are carrying that out. It's also a great opportunity to have a 5-minute one-to-one with them and find out
Definitely.
what are the challenges, what feedback have you got, how can we help you moving forward. And I think if a transport manager is well developed, well trained with their communication skills, they can make that a really, really valuable bit of time to get some information and get some feedback about how things are and what changes can be made, or how we can better support and engage drivers. For sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And the other thing that I would mention in all of that is, obviously, when you're working with your people and getting the best out of your people, you one of the things you want to know is what motivates them. And whilst I don't want to work through all the things that motivate different people, I would say that everybody in some way is going to be motivated about safety and getting home safe and getting home to the family. And that can be, operator licensing in itself. That life that we live is all about safety. So when you're doing your gate checks, you're talking to your driver. Drive. My interest is keeping you safe, and that's why we're double up into some of these checks. When you're talking to drivers about infringements, well, my job is making sure you don't get too fatigued and you're getting your rest. And when you're dealing with maintenance issues, it's all about safety. And I think that's a universal motivator. If you spin it in the right way, everybody wants to get home safe. So
Yeah,
I think that's
definitely.
a good way of engaging people as well.
Definitely. And it's that balance of productivity and, particularly with infringements, the balance of product. We want you to be well rested. We want you to have a break. We want you to not be fatigued. Productivity is important, but we need to do it in an appropriate way. And we need to make sure that everything's fine. Fantastic. Excellent. Okay. Did you have any more tips for
I
us,
have one
James?
more.
One
Yeah,
more.
I did write down a third. And as I say, I'm glad actually that as I say, like-minded, you and I, you mentioned it at the top, and so the third tip that I had was really directed at transport managers, and that is maintain your knowledge. And playing into, and I'll come to it in a second, what you said about CPT. So we know that a few years ago, the traffic commissioners solidified in their statutory documents an update that said TMs must show competence beyond just their qualification. So gone are the days where you can say, I've got my CPC certification, I am vocationally, professionally competent, and that's all I need. Those days are gone now. That's not enough, and rightly so, I think, because I'm of the same view as you, that continually professionally developing yourself is really important. And I think it is vital, and it's easily missed by TMs, again, with greatest intentions, because these are super busy people, really, really busy. And to take a moment to attend a conference or read some of the trade press is difficult. I do understand that. But nevertheless, I wanted it on my list of tips, and that is that, I recommend all TMs have, in my view, an active CPD document. I think you should write it down for two reasons. One is that if you're ever in a situation where you're challenged on what you do, by a TC or someone, to maintain your knowledge, you've got it documented. So I attended a conference on this date. I listened to Pete's podcast every couple of weeks. It's all good stuff. It's all good stuff to say that you're doing something, you're active in the industry to maintain your knowledge. Simple things that I think everyone should be doing, such as subscribing to the DVSA, moving on blogs, some of that essential stuff that's going to feed you really important information. But again, put it on in my view, put it on some sort of active CPD document so that you've got that as evidence. And then the other thing which keeps the CPD document live and isn't just a record is having some reflection on where you think your gaps are. So if you think, I'm not great at reading brake test reports, then don't forget that or leave it in your head. Write it on your CPD document so that you've got a bit, as well as having a record of what you've done to maintain your knowledge, you've maybe always got a couple of things on the bottom that says, actually, that's something I really want to do. So leave it, make it a working document. And that could be something technical that I've just described. It could be something like, well, I'm going to seek out a transport managers conference this year, and I'm going to attend that because there are lots of them out there. Yeah, that was my third one. Yeah, magazine subscriptions, trade body memberships, conferences, webinars. There's loads of stuff out there, and that's gonna improve. It does two things as well as just improving your own knowledge. The other thing it does, it improves your credibility. So when I go back to my people piece, when you're engaging drivers and managers and all sorts of people in the operation, you have far greater credibility when you are super competent, by keeping yourself up with legislative changes or keeping yourself up to date with just what's moving in the industry at the moment. So yeah, CPD. My third top tip, Pete.
Amazing, and I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And do you know what? I'm so fluffed up that you said, "How about listening to Pete's podcast?" I love that. Fantastic. That's motivated me to carry on doing many more. Sorry to those who are not enjoying it. Anyway, but I totally agree around CPD. I couldn't agree more at all. Actually, I reflected the other day, and this is just to give. I suppose I'm fortunate because for a while I've worked for smaller family-owned businesses, but I also worked for a big corporate too, where safety, environment, and quality was a vital part of what they do, and particularly development as well. And I think it kind of changes. It gives you like a paradigm shift around investment in training and investment in yourselves and what have you. But certainly whilst I do external transport management, I'm just about to have a team of 7 people with me as well, and we do a bit more than just transport. But yeah, my 7th guy will be starting in September. He's working a 3-month notice period. I've just employed a local national compliance manager for a large fleet. He's coming in as well to support the compliance work we're doing. And so I have to develop myself not only from a transport point of view, but also from a leadership point of view. And I can tell, particularly speaking to you, James, that you've had quite a bit of leadership when we talk about things like motivation and communication skills, and what's classed as, I don't like the term soft skills, but they're such a vital part of the role as well. And I was reflecting, and actually this year alone, I'm personally investing £1,000 a month in my development, which is really like quite a bit. I was sort of quite surprised. I was like, do you know what? Some business owners who go out and have a Range Rover or something like that, and I'm not. I'm still running around in a Kia Picanto half the time. But I'm developing me and the business for the future is sort of how I'm looking at it. But one of the things I do, which is a bit left field, so I do all of the things that we've just said, and just to hopefully add a little bit of value and to maybe get people thinking a bit differently, I also I do something called Vistage, which is leadership development, and we're the smallest business. I'm the smallest business of that group that I participate in, but it's essentially like a peer group. They're from different industries, but they're all leaders in their own right. And we talk about things like people development and training and how we can engage people and policies and things like that. So what I find great is that kind of gives me a fresh approach to an old problem. How does a different sector approach a problem, for example? And then alongside that, I also do. I have like some personal coaching around sort of myself, and it's almost a little bit therapy as well. It helps with my mental health and things like that. Sure. And but that helps keep me understand how our ticks are talking about motivations and things. It's important to know what makes you tick as well and helps you develop. But I sort of drawing it back to an industry point of view, I definitely agree. At the moment, on top of that, I think what's bumped up the cost of that investment as I look at it is I'm upgrading my health and safety qualification to a diploma as well. So that's obviously added some expense and time as well, but I think it's so worthwhile. but I subscribe to the DVSA. The HSE is a great website as well. So you get you can get HSE updates come through. So you get to find out about absence statistics, and there's things around mental health that come out, and stress in the workplace, and all of that. You know, you can sort of repurpose that for our audience as well. So there's so many different areas. One of the things I just wanted to quiz you on quickly, James, is, and I know that's something that you're looking at the moment based on a recent post on social media, and that's certainly the sort of trade bodies and the trade memberships and what have you. So I'm a member of SILT, and I also I have customers who are subscribed to RHA, whilst I don't at the moment. What's your sort of take on that, and do you think that there's maybe something more that transport managers could do, or it feels almost like, so one of the things I know you were looking at, I just frame that a little bit better, was around external transport managers and the representations of those. I'm quite interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you're right. I asked the question because I think that a lot of big organizations, bigger transport operators, get a lot out of the trade relationships they have. I think in their case, a lot of the time it's about you get out what you put in. You know, if you're really active in engaging your trade body, then you're helping them in terms of defining how they influence government, influence legislation, influence local councils, and you're really active in that engagement, then you can make a difference. The reason I put the post on social media, and as exactly as you say, was because I hear a lot of external transport managers talking about frustrations that they have, you know, about different aspects of the industry. And I asked myself, well, you know, how is that external transport manager population represented by you know, these organizations like RHA, Logistics UK and stuff, in affecting change and having a voice. And I think what you know, the responses to my post bore out what I was concerned about, and that is that I don't think that the external transport manager population is well represented in that arena. And I even spoke to one of the trade bodies and asked them what their thoughts on that was, and I think it was, to be fair, I think they probably kind of agreed that those smaller memberships, those individual memberships from external transport managers weren't that numerous. So yeah, it's an interest for me, Pete. It was an interesting point because I think they do have a lot of value. I work really closely, as it goes, with Logistics UK. I chair the Greater London Freight Council. I chair the Van Policy Working Group, both of which they facilitate. I attend National Road Council. I do a van working group with Highways England, and I think that it enables me to influence some stuff and put an opinion forward, which makes a difference with a lot of other, you know, not just me. There's a lot of other. I sit round a table, you know, probably in all of the groups once a month, effectively, which are with a group of other industry players, you know. But I think my challenge, going back to the point, was that it's often the big players, and I wonder, I haven't got the answer, but I wonder what the industry needs to do to give a better voice to these really hard-working external transport managers who in a lot of ways have a tougher job. You know, these guys are often on their own, and they're not like an internal transport manager who usually has a bit of a support structure. External transport managers are often there on their own. You know, they've got maintenance, and they've got driver's hours, and they've got operator licensing and operating centre and everything that goes along with that. And I think it's a super tough job. And my point about the trade organisations was because I was asking myself, wouldn't it be great if that big group of really knowledgeable expert external transport managers were also having their voice heard and influencing that. So that's what that came out of.
Amazing. And I think I think you're absolutely right, and let's see what comes of it. You know, I think external transport managers need a bigger voice. I'm quite passionate about that. I suppose as one, that's part of what we do, and I don't know how that looks. I don't know how we can evolve it. And I think one of the things that frustrates me, and that is the overall general sort of bad reputation, or potentially bad reputation around external transport management. And I think there's some organisations or groups on some of the social media channels that are not very I feel as well run. I need to be very careful what I say here. I think I might just stop, actually. But yeah, if anyone does want to, what I will say is, if anyone does want to have a genuine debate and look at those things, I do host a transport manager and consultants hub on Facebook, where I try and make sure everything is very impartial. It's not really for advertising services. The purpose of it is to just actually, we're not about connecting external transport managers with work. We're not about anything like that. It's about personal development. It's about professional development, and for any questions in a really safe environment where I administer it, and as it grows, I'll look for other people to help me do that, because it isn't, there's no sales agenda there at all. Okay, brill. What's your biggest frustration then with the industry, James?
Frustration. I don't know that I've got a biggest, because we all have frustrations, don't there? A number of them. So I ended up, I'm going to make this really high level. I was really quite general with it, and I'm going to spin it as you would expect as you get to know me. I'm going to spin it and say biggest opportunity, I think, is just that recognition of the freight industry as essential infrastructure in the UK. Now, that's really high level, but I think that will drive a lot of improvement in the other frustrations we have. So without being cliche, because I know it's a real common retort for a lot of people in the transport industry at the moment, but they're right in what they're saying. Last year, we saw a lot of credit, and quite rightly so, given to the transport sector, because they supported the country through a really tough time. Yeah, and there's no doubt that it was perhaps for a lot of people the first time that they stood up and thought, wow, look what the transport industry does for us, getting things to where they need to be bought or serviced, whatever it may be. And there was talk during that period about the need to recognise freight, or the transport sector industry, as essential infrastructure, and I still think I don't think we should let that go. I think it should be. It absolutely should be. And the reason I say that, just to kind of look what sits underneath that a little bit, perhaps some examples would be, I don't necessarily think we would face some of the same challenges. I think some of the challenges would be significantly helped if it was recognised as essential infrastructure. So I know we're going to go on to talk about it, but would it be as hard for us to face into this driver shortage challenge? Some of the things that we want to see in terms of improving the driver shortage, would that be as difficult for us if transport was recognised as essential infrastructure? There's lots of things I can talk about, but let's say driver facilities up and down the country. That's an emotive subject for drivers, and you could even say topically at the moment, when we've got areas of Kent now in the news because they're saying, well, we're going to stop drivers from parking in our laybys for anything more than 45 minutes, and that's a direct attack, if you will, on the heavy goods vehicle driver. And I know there's some positive motivations, because they've got all through traffic to the south coast and to the continent, and they don't want all the laybys clogging up. But my belief is there's a better balance there, and I think, again, is that something that would be, the change would be motivated a little bit better if the industry was recognised as essential. Road user charging could be another one I throw in there. We've got let's take London, for example. A lot of us are close to that. So we've got DVS, we've got the London Lorry Control Scheme, we've got Safer Lorry Scheme, we've got the low emission zone and the ultra low emission zone. Later in the year, TfL will start consultation on, and I can't remember the new name for it, but an additional central London road user charge as part of their commitment to the money that the government paid them to bail them out and support them. So they've had some commitments. So there's more of that going on. We've got clean air zones all around the country. And whilst, again, I'll acknowledge that I'm super supportive of all of these measures that improve air quality and health of people, absolutely. But I wonder if the freight industry would face quite as many varied, this multiplicity of challenges, which all deplete margins and make it harder to operate if we were recognised as essential infrastructure. So there you go. It's a little bit higher level, but that was my kind of thought in terms of biggest opportunity. Perhaps that would be my point.
Brilliant. I don't know how well qualified I am to comment on this. However, it was great. I think I'd echo your point around. It was great to see certainly transport workers having the key worker badge last year. I think that was fantastic, and putting them on a putting the sector on a par with the, not necessarily on a par with the NHS, because that's quite emotive, but up at key worker status.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Goes to demonstrate how vital the infrastructure is to our existence as a civilization. I think you're right in that if we raised the profile of the sector and we improved the perception of people and the level of investment that we had towards the sector, I think it would go to improve the driver shortage. So I suppose the next question is going to be, well, how can we improve the driver shortage, which we'll talk about in a mo. But I think overall, it's not a glamorous sector to work in. I was interviewing Roger Grafe a couple of weeks ago, who's a filmmaker, BAFTA award-winning filmmaker, and the podcast will be out shortly. But he used to be involved in sort of architecture and infrastructure and those kinds of things. And actually, people getting from A to B, public transport, or people's goods getting to them, or refuse collection, or whatever it may be, it's not a sexy part of society, and it never really will be. But it's what brings us into the 21st century, and it is, that infrastructure is what it is. And I think we need to do more. We need to do more to support those organisations, because at the moment the margins are getting pinched. There's a lack of investment. Margins are really, really tight, and it's just, we've got a lot of companies in the sector that are just feeling very, very squeezed. It's a high capital investment. Very, very high capital investment, very low margin. And when you look at it as a sector against other sectors and the return on investment, and if we start to talk hard numbers and things like that, it's a real challenge, and it is. I don't know what the answer is, but so maybe we move on to driver shortage, because I don't know what the answer to that is either.
And I don't either. And I think, in answering your question about, biggest frustration, I think if I'd picked on some smaller frustrations, we might have been able to come up with some answers. But I think there are perhaps too many to choose from. So I wanted to kind of, I don't think that you and I are going to have an answer to how we get government to recognise how essential the infrastructure, transport infrastructure should be. But I think that my point is that if it would drive down a lot of the other challenges that we have, I think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. So moving on then to sort of frame the discussion around driver shortage, and to sort of see your perspective on that. One of the things that I see in the position I'm in at the moment is I deal with a varying amount of small companies. We do training to smaller and medium-sized family-owned businesses in the transport sector, and it feels like there's a very, very small pond of drivers that everyone's trying to fish out of at the moment. And it's very much, certainly in my part of the world, we're looking at what I would say a quite worrying drivers market, where drivers are able to move around for the vehicle they want, or for the wages that they want to just fit them, and transport owners are left tearing their hair out trying to fulfill and being able to run operationally. Is that something you're witnessing in your part of the world as well? And what's going on?
Yeah, no doubt. It's a massive challenge. I've been at a couple of meetings, with other people in the industry over the last couple of months, and the sentiment is generally that we shouldn't be talking about anything else. I know there's a lot going on, but there's a lot of big companies out there saying this is the only subject on the agenda. It's that critical. Obviously, that's a kind of exaggerating to make the point when people say that, but that's the sentiment. So you're absolutely right. It's a massive challenge, and no doubt, again, a little bit cliche, but it's this perfect storm, isn't it? That we've seen potentially seen coming, but we kind of were suspicious of. So we saw the end of the transition period last year, which resulted in a bit of an exodus of some of that, the European professionals that stopped working in the UK. Then we've had the deferred introduction of IR35, and that's had an additional impact. And then, of course, last year there was, I can't remember the number, tens of thousands of driving tests that got postponed by the DVLA. So this kind of perfect storm, you're exactly right, has resulted in, and I don't think any of us need to talk about the who we work for. It's affecting everybody. No doubt, and it's a real challenge, and it's a difficult one to talk about how you're going to fix it quickly.
Yes.
I think, and I'll talk about a couple of thoughts I have on what can help perhaps give us some turnaround quicker. But this isn't. Yeah, there's got to be some long-term measures in place as well. So I think in terms of what we could be doing, I mean, it's good that the DVLA have restarted testing, and they're doing that at a pace. So they've restarted at about twice their normal capacity, which is great news. And so my hope would be that they continue with that, if not increase it. Let's get whatever drivers are available to us. This won't just be, new drivers who are waiting for the test. There's a whole group of people in that pot who companies have invested in through apprenticeship schemes. So last year there were a lot of companies that were partway through in apprenticeship scheme with drivers who then couldn't complete them. So there's a real glut of drivers who are ready to go, who just need the test. So I hope that continues at a pace.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and again, this is a bit kind of governmental. I can't influence it necessarily, but I think grants or interest-free loans for those wanting to acquire their license, maybe we should incentivize that a bit more. Like you say, it's not always an attractive industry. It's not something that schools and colleges will necessarily be promoting at the forefront of their careers discussions. I think they should. So I have that as a separate point, that I think schools and colleges should be doing more to promote that, and businesses should attract from schools and colleges. But it's not a cheap step, is it, getting your license? So it'd be good if there was some grants or additional financial support for people who want to acquire their license.
Mm-hmm.
Apprenticeships again need to continue. I think there's more. I mean, we've seen some increased money for heavy goods vehicle drivers doing apprenticeships recently, but that should continue, because I think that's an opportunity. It's not a short-term one, but for companies that can invest in apprenticeships, then you're investing in the future, aren't you? So that's an opportunity. And then again, on the bigger scale, not something I can influence, but I can give you an opinion. I think that the government can do more to re-energize our access to the European labour market. So by adding, for example, HGV drivers to the UK shortage occupation list. They're not on there at the moment. It's not recognised as a occupation that we're short of. And I think that recognition of that would then allow, more of that European professionals to come back and join us. I think, again, short term, the government could consider short-term temporary visa scheme. It's not unheard of. We're not reinventing the wheel here. If you go and look at the farming industry, forgive the terminology, it's not my area of expertise, but there's existing temporary visa scheme for people to come over and support that industry. We absolutely could do that with HGV drivers, and again, that would give us access to a market that we haven't got at the moment. And then probably tied into those, then again, the permanent long-term recognition of an HGV driver as having a qualification that automatically grants them access to the UK market. So again, that isn't the case at the moment. The HGV driving, the HGV license entitlement is a level 2 qualification. The old kind of, they talk about it as a GCSE equivalent to, for those not familiar with those levels. But a level 2 qualification isn't automatically recognised as a vocation that you can come and access the UK for. And I think it should be, again, tied into that whole shortage occupation list. So I think there's some stuff that the government can do that would help us short term and long term. But again, I haven't got a quick answer. It's tough, and I think you're absolutely right. The point about us now, and you see it in the press. We've started to see it in the press over the last couple of weeks. This rhetoric about the solution being drivers' wages are going to go up, which is no good if your margins are tight. That's how does that help? So that's a worrying development. Is that, I think.
Yeah, I've been on mute because the dog's been going off on one. I think the postman's just arrived. Another key worker, by the way. Just make that point. I think you've made some amazing points there, and I've not got a great deal of value that I feel qualified to add, other than I think if we're going to do financial grants, which I think is a really great idea, zero interest loans for people to get the license and that sort of thing. I think insurance companies are going to need to come to the party with insuring new drivers and younger drivers as well, and whether family type businesses will get grants to be able to support that as well. I think that would be a really, really good use of government money to get people into work. And I think you're absolutely right. Wages can't improve where you've got a sector which is struggling for margin and with high levels of capital investment, which we are. We have to be realistic around wages. What we need to promise is reliable, consistent employment, which is, I think, in these times, is a real, valuable thing, because there's industries out there which people can't sort of build a family around and build a career around. Well, actually, the transport sector can offer that.
Yeah.
It may not be that people are going to be able to afford the Instagram lifestyle, for example, but they're going to get great experience, great exposure to travel in the country. There's some really good examples of flexible working patterns, around different things. And maybe as a sector, we could be better around offering flexible working patterns, for example, because of we're a 24/7 business. So essentially we could offer those things, and those things could be considered. But I guess, my only real thing is, I think one of the big blockers is ensuring younger drivers and newer drivers, and I think both the insurance companies could help incentivise that, and it'd be a really good use of government money, like you say as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. And I'd certainly say to anyone considering going into driving as a vocation, it's a great career move. It is stable employment. There's no, if you want to drive, there is plenty of work out there, and you won't be without a job if you're a good driver, if you're safe, if you're focused on making sure that you on road safety, on making sure that you don't overwork your infringements or anything silly like that. Then there's good stable employment, and there'll be an army of employers looking to bring you into the business.
Absolutely. We talk about it being challenged, but at the moment, if you're a driver, it's your market. So that's some something.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. So James, I'm going to move it on to sort of the final area that I wanted to ask you about. You've recently been through the process of becoming approved for earned recognition.
Sure.
It'd just be great for me particularly. I haven't been particularly close to it as yet. It is something that I see will potentially be something that the business gets involved with, as there's more of a business case for us to do it. But I'm interested to hear sort of how that went and what the process is like, and any insights that you can share on earned recognition, please, James.
Yeah, happy to. No, and I'm, obviously I'm pleased. We went through it and have been successfly accredited to it. So yeah, it's a great achievement.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's something I've had my eye on. As you know, I work in the industry and with a lot of external organizations for some time, and so I've been kind of following earned recognition since whatever it was, 2016. It was mooted. I think the first piloting operators were in 2017, and I've followed it really closely throughout that time. And I have to confess, in the beginning, I was a little bit hesitant. Not that was a negative reflection on earned recognition, but I said my view was, I'd like to see it mature. I'd like to see what benefits are going to be available in future before I I promote it as a positive for the employer that I work for. And clearly I wasn't on my own. You know, we all know that uptake was really slow in the beginning. I think it's picking up now. I see on social media more and more people getting accreditation or talking about going through it. So I think maybe they've turned a corner. But what made my decision was I think that it was good to see a real commercial benefit offered last year in terms of those MOT extensions. So if you were, I can't remember the criteria now, I think if you had a green OCRS, or you were earned recognition, you were given an MOT exemption regardless of age of your fleet, you know, which I think was really a really strong benefit. Some would argue that actually that wasn't the earned recognition giving the benefit. That was the DVSA desperately trying to find a way to resolve their MOT situation. But I'm not going to, I'll not pass judgment. Let's just say that they offered the benefit to earned recognition accredited operators, and that's a great signal to the industry that that's the way to go. And I know that there's other things they're talking about that could come in the pipeline, and even if there's not specific things that they're looking at which could be made available to earned recognition operators, which will give a good tangible benefit, there's this general talk about, well, if there are going to be initiatives in the future, even if they be for everybody in the future, you know, let's work with our earned recognition operators first. So I think there is some potential for us to see some commercial benefits. There's no doubt, though, that the softer benefits are there as well, and I don't want to. You know, I should encourage people, you know, to really think about those. So the prospect of so the principle, for those who don't know, that the DVS operate on in terms of earned recognition is that it supports them with their enforcement. So the DVSA don't want to be enforcing compliant organizations. That takes up time, it takes up resource, and they want to be, along with us, they want to be focusing on operators that are seriously non-compliant for whatever reason, and that's where we want their energies to be as well. So if you're an earned recognition operator, you know, there's some great benefits in fewer roadside stops, fewer visits to your facilities. If you do have incidents, which, as I said earlier on, things always go wrong, you know, incidents can happen, then you report that directly, and there's some immediate conversation between you and the regulator, which again is a benefit. It may curb formal action because you're engaging them straight away. There's potentially a benefit to your business of having that accolade, you know, having a sticker on your truck that says earned recognition, or being able to tell your customers that you can access this website and you know, my name is there to demonstrate that I'm a compliant operator. So yeah, I'm really pleased that, you know, it was the right time for us to join. In terms of the process, so high level, the process isn't a complicated one. You know, they've made it relatively simple in terms of the steps you take. You have there are some eligibility criteria in the first place, and I can't remember them all, but it's about length of time you've been operating, a period of time where you've had no you know, prosecutions in terms of public inquiries and that sort of thing. You've been well behaved for some period. I can't remember all the eligibility criteria, but they're not too, you know, prohibitive. Then there's the audit. So before you become a member, you have to undertake an external audit. There are a bunch of accredited auditors out there. There's a list of named accredited auditors, and you invite them in to do the audit. And I guess therein lies the tough part. It's that preparation. So preparing for the audit is quite a challenge, because it's not a small audit. It's not a small thing at all. It's very detailed. I've got it right next to me here. I might refer to it in a second. It's a 74-page document, and I will actually, if I may, Pete, I'll run you through the headlines, because
that's great.
There are 9 sectors, and I think this will help people in understanding, you know, what it looks at, to give you a flavour. Obviously, underneath each heading, there's a whole load of detail, but look, let me just whiz through the 9 sections of the audit, that gives you a flavour of what's covered. So operator licensing is one, and that's the big stuff, like having the correct legal entity, condition and undertakings on your license, your operating centres, your high-level operator license stuff. Transport manager and responsible person is section 2, and that's all about their knowledge and their effective control. Vehicle standards, that's a big long list, because obviously that's your maintenance, everything to do with your maintenance. So they will audit you to death on everything from walk around checks, maintenance routines, first use inspection, recalls, something that you're not thinking about every day. So it's very detailed. And then similarly, as you would expect, the other big topic that we work day-to-day, driver's hours. So all about your infringement handling, returning of records, speed limit compliance, tachographs, all of that stuff. Section 5 is operational management. So this is where it's a standard which isn't wholly compliance, it's a safety, efficiency and compliance standard. So in the operational management, they look a little bit outside of the everyday compliance stuff in terms of insurance and your routines around tax and agency drivers, use of subcontractors, overloading, operational routines. Then there's a section on driver management, which covers driver recruitment and license checking and payment and incentives, those sort of things. A section on driver training and behaviour, so CPCs, behaviours, telematics, all of that. Other driver related policies is a bit miscellaneous, which covers things like mobile phone policy, drugs and alcohol, that they don't fit anywhere else. And then finally, a section for those for whom it's applicable on ADR. So hopefully, Pete, that's just giving you a flavour there. There's 9 sections there, and underneath each of those, there's a load of detail. So the audit is quite exhaustive. And I guess the other point I'd make about that, for those who are considering giving it a go, is it's more about your policies and routines, going back to my earlier point, than it is about that snapshot of what I can see on the day. When the auditor comes, they're going to be more interested in, let's choose an example. What are your policies and routines around driver behaviours or infringements or maintenance routines, rather than actually I looked at something on the day, I looked at a vehicle record on the day, I looked at a driver on the day. That's not what it's about. Some audits, we know they're a snapshot, and the auditor comes in, looks at what's a day, and that's your judgment. Earned recognition isn't like that. It's really about having policies and routines that back everything up. Which obviously I gave it as a top tip earlier on. I think that's good for any transport operator, but it also means that, if on the day something isn't going to be perfectly in line, that's not an issue. It's all about having policies and routines to demonstrate, this is the situation, and when it goes wrong, we've got these really robust routines that make sure that it's a one-off and it isn't repeated. So really exhaustive audit, I would say. Anyone who wants to start looking at it, that's your key. Start looking, what are my policies around tax discs, what's my policy around insurance, all of that. And then on top, Pete, obviously the other bit then ongoing for those who are interested is this bit about sending data to the regulator every month. So really important, I think, on their behalf. I feel I should bust a myth here. It's not about the DVSA accessing your data. They don't want to do that. They haven't got time to do that, and you wouldn't want it either. Not for today, I'm sure, Pete, I could go on for ages, but there are a very defined set of it's not even data, it's yes, no. Did I meet this KPI? Did I not? So there'll be an infringement percentage target that you've got to meet. The MOT target is 95% over a period of time. There's a 100% target on making sure all your vehicles and trailers are serviced within their defined frequency. So there's a list of, off the top of my head, 9 or 10 KPIs. And all you do is all that's transmitted to the DVSA once a period, once every 4 weeks, is did I make it or did I not? And there's a couple of,
Okay.
like a red, amber, green style thing. I won't go into it, but it's that sort of style. So they're not looking at all your data. They're just getting some monthly verification that you're hitting the KPIs, that you're remaining compliant. And if you fall short of one, again, that's not the end of the world. It just prompts a discussion between you and the regulator about what happened, what are you doing to fix it. Great. And they're really supportive. It's not I didn't feel at any point under any pressure. They were really supportive every step of the way. So for those who want to get involved, then start those conversations with the DVSA. The earned recognition team are really supportive. There's a bit of work to do to get there, but they don't make it a challenging or a high pressure process at all.
Perfect. I think it's good. It's good to know that there's a grown-up conversation to be had around having an effective transport management system. I think that is probably the customers I speak to, or the operators I speak to. I think the query is around what level of data is shared and that information. But essentially, if you're sharing a report each month around whether you've a red, amber, green process with an element of KPIs, which we should all be working to anyway.
Sure.
That's something that we should be working to without doubt anyway. So therefore, if we're sharing those, we're demonstrating that the desire and the intentions there to do the right thing and to be a compliant operator. So there's no real reason not to. It sounds like it's been really insightful for me, actually, having not been involved in a company that's got earned recognition, just seeing what that's like to live with. So, and I assume that you then have an annual audit, which will then make sure that your reporting mechanism on a monthly basis is true reflection of what's happening, and that's sort of what that future process of maintaining it will be like. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, once you're a member, there are kind of three ongoing elements really, and that is a 2-yearly audit. So we come back every 2 years. There is the KPI thing that I mentioned. So your software providers will be transmitting that bit of data to them every month, just so that they know you're keeping up the standard. And then there's then you have some obligations in terms of reporting. So if you have a serious incident, a serious crash, a conviction, a bridge strike, then you've got to report that to them as well. But again, that's so that they can support you and make sure that there isn't a pattern building up of non-compliance. So they're kind of the 3 things that are then part of that ongoing membership.
Fantastic. James, there endeth my questions. I think we've just tipped over the hour mark, but at the top end, we had the conversation around. We weren't sure if there was enough stuff. You said you'd got some notes and what have you.
It's true.
It's amazing, isn't it? It just flies.
It does. I'm glad we had lots to share. It's good.
Yeah, James, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest. For those that are listening, and if you're on LinkedIn, you can get in touch with James on LinkedIn or on Facebook. He's a member of the various transport manager groups and what have you, and shares some really good insights as well. So it's well worth being a member of those groups. I mentioned the group that I look after earlier, so I shan't do that again. Listen back if you want to remember it. But there we go. There endeth the question. So thank you very much, James, for having me. Thank you everyone for listening. I think as we said about CPD, listen, record it, make sure that it's a living document. So carry on subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with friends as well. And take care. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
I really hope you loved today's episode, and if you did, please make sure you subscribe and listen out for future episodes too. Please do share it across your social media channels. We hope to reach more and help more people. If you want to find out more about me, my name's Pete Rushmer. You'll find me across any social media channel and my business, Flagship Partners, and we're your partners in success across your business. Thank you. See you again soon.